Please make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. They say your children will take care of you when you're old. They lie. When my only daughter, Clara, stood in the middle of her living room and told me I was just another extra mouth to feed, I felt something in me shatter. I had raised her alone, worked 3 jobs to send her to college, and gone without new shoes for 10 years just so she could have the best. But that day, I saw the truth in her eyes. She didn't see me as her mother anymore. She saw me as a burden. I left her apartment with only my handbag, my dignity, and a bitterness that tasted like ash. She didn't know I had a secret. For 30 years, I'd quietly invested every spare cent, in stocks, in gold, in property. I never flaunted my wealth because I didn't want her growing up spoiled. But when she shoved me out into the cold that rainy evening, I decided one thing: if she thought I was extra, I'd show her just how extra I could be. And so, 2 months later, I became her landlord. I still remember the sound of the rain pounding against my umbrella that night. My shoes were soaked, my bones ached, and I kept asking myself what I had done to raise a daughter who could throw her own mother into the street. But anger has a way of sharpening the mind. The very next morning, I sat at my kitchen table, in the small but warm house I still owned on the other side of town, and called my lawyer. "Mrs. Evans," he said, his voice warm and familiar, "I assume this isn't just a friendly chat." "It's not," I replied flatly. "I want to buy a building." I didn't care which building. I didn't care how much it cost. I only cared about one address, 412 Mayberry Avenue, my daughter's apartment complex. By some cruel twist of fate, or divine justice, the owner had been trying to sell for months. A cash offer made him light up like Christmas. Within 18 days, I held the deed in my hand. When I signed my name, I smiled for the first time since that night. Not because of revenge, but because I realized I had the power to write my own ending. 2 weeks later, my daughter found a letter taped to her door, with my name printed in bold at the bottom. It wasn't an eviction notice. Not yet. It was a rent increase. 3 times what she had been paying. It was a Saturday morning when I heard the sharp, frantic banging on my front door. I already knew who it was, and I was ready. I took my time walking to the door, letting her stew in her anger for a few more seconds. When I opened it, there she stood, my daughter Clara, with her hair in disarray, her face flushed, and a crumpled letter clutched in her hand. "What the hell is this?" she snapped, shoving the paper toward me. I glanced at it, feigning innocence. "Looks like a rent adjustment notice." Her voice cracked. "Triple the rent, Mom? Are you insane?" I studied her face. The same face I used to kiss goodnight. The same eyes I once looked into when she was a newborn. But there was no warmth now. Only entitlement. "You mean, Mrs. Evans," I corrected calmly, "your landlord." Her jaw dropped. You bought our building." "Yes," I said, stepping aside so she could see the framed deed hanging in my hallway. "Paid in full." Clara's voice trembled with rage. "You can't do this to me. I have 2 kids, bills." I cut her off. "I can and I will. And if you think I'm bluffing, I suggest you reread your lease." She stared at me like she didn't recognize me anymore, but I didn't recognize her either. This was not the little girl who used to hold my hand crossing the street. This was a woman who had kicked her mother into the cold. "Finally," she hissed, "you're petty. This is revenge." I stepped closer, my voice low and steady. "No, Clara. This is a lesson. Life doesn't hand you comfort just because you demand it. You earn it, and you respect those who gave it to you. Her eyes darted to the floor. So what now? She asked. I smiled thinly. You have 60 days to adjust to the new rent, or find somewhere else to live. She stormed off without another word. As I watched her car speed away, I felt the smallest sting in my chest, a mother's love trying to push through my anger. But I pushed it back down. Because this time, the lesson would stick. 2 weeks passed. I hadn't heard from Clara directly, but whispers from the other tenants trickled up to me. She was going door to door, rallying neighbors, telling them I was some greedy, heartless slumlord who didn't care about families. The irony almost made me laugh. She was perfectly fine when she thought the landlord was some faceless corporation. Now that it was me, suddenly it was an outrage. On a Thursday afternoon, Mrs. Lopez from the second floor called me. Your daughter's been handing out flyers, she said, her voice dripping with gossip. Talking about a rent strike. I leaned back in my chair. A rent strike? Yes, Mrs. Lopez continued. And she says she has a plan to make you sell the building back. That piqued my interest. I thanked her and hung up, my mind already working. If Clara thought she could outmaneuver me, she had forgotten one important fact. I didn't survive decades of raising her, paying bills, and scraping through life without learning a thing or two about strategy. That evening, I drove past the building. Sure enough, there she was on the stoop, surrounded by a small group of tenants, gesturing animatedly with a clipboard in her hand. When her eyes caught mine through the car window, her lips curled into a smirk. A silent message passed between us: game on. The next morning, I visited my lawyer. I laid out every detail, every tactic Clara might try. He listened carefully before leaning back with a slow grin. Mrs. Evans, you've got more leverage than you think. If they strike, you have legal grounds to evict every last one of them. And if I do? I asked. He shrugged. You could gut the building, renovate, and rent it out to new tenants at double the price. I left his office with the paperwork already in motion. If Clara wanted a war, she was about to find out her mother didn't fight fair, she fought to win. By the end of the month, Clara's rent strike had gained momentum. A few tenants had stopped paying, emboldened by her little rebellion. What she didn't realize was that I had been quietly collecting evidence, missed payments, recorded confrontations, and signed complaints from the neighbors who were tired of her antics. I was ready to file for eviction. But Clara didn't wait for the hammer to drop. She came for me first. It was a Friday night when I got the call from the security company. Mrs. Evans, we've detected unauthorized access at your home. I rushed back, heart pounding, only to find my front door hanging open. The place wasn't ransacked, not exactly, but it was searched. My drawers were pulled out, papers scattered. Someone had been hunting for something. I didn't need a detective to tell me who. Clara had a habit of leaving her scent everywhere. The same vanilla body spray she'd worn since she was 16 still lingered in the hallway. The next morning, she showed up at the building with an expression I knew too well, the smug satisfaction of thinking she had the upper hand. She'd found my file. The one with the renovation plans. The one that made it clear I intended to gut the place and replace every tenant. So, this is your plan, she hissed, holding up copies she'd made. Kick everyone out so you can turn their homes into luxury condos. Including your own daughter. Yes, I said flatly. Her eyes widened. You're not even denying it. I'm not denying anything anymore, I replied. You wanted a fight, Clara. Now you've got one. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Then you've got no idea what's coming, Mom. I watched her walk away, knowing that whatever she had planned next, it wasn't going to be legal or clean. And that meant I had to strike first. The morning after Clara's threat, I woke up with one clear thought. If she wanted a war, I'd win it before she had a chance to draw her sword. I went straight to my lawyer. By noon, the paperwork was ready. By 3 p.m., I had the sheriff's department on standby. But I didn't just want to evict her. No, I wanted her cornered. I wanted the same hopelessness she had left me with the night she tossed me out like garbage. I called an emergency tenants meeting in the lobby. Every tenant came down, curious, worried, some angry. Clara walked in last, holding her phone up like she was recording a reality show. I let her. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, holding up a thick folder, our building is in trouble. Not because of rent hikes, but because of one tenant who has failed to pay rent for 2 months, harassed neighbors, and broken into my home. Gasps filled the room. Clara's smirk twitched. I opened the folder and pulled out signed statements from tenants. Not just one or two, nearly everyone. They'd had enough of her loud music, late-night arguments, and queen bee attitude. Then came the trump card, the security footage of her entering my house without permission. The timestamp didn't lie. You broke into my home, Clara, I said, my voice steady. That's not just grounds for eviction, it's a criminal offense. Her face drained of color. You can't. Oh, I can. And I will. I handed the eviction notice to the sheriff, who stepped forward and placed it in her trembling hands. You have 72 hours to vacate the premises, he said. And then I twisted the knife. I've already listed your unit, I told her. Triple the rent. Someone signed the lease this morning. The lobby erupted in murmurs. Clara just stood there, frozen, the reality sinking in. This time, I didn't walk away quietly like I had the night she kicked me out. I stood tall, in front of every witness, and watched her pack her pride into a silence she couldn't swallow. For the first time in years, I won. 3 days later, I stood by my window, coffee in hand, watching the moving truck pull away. Clara didn't look up once. No grand scene. No screaming. Just a woman who finally realized she wasn't untouchable. Some neighbors clapped quietly when she left, others simply breathed a sigh of relief. Me? I didn't cheer. I didn't smile. I just felt light. It wasn't about the money. It was never about the rent. It was about the night she looked me in the eye, her own mother, and said I was an extra mouth. That night, I promised myself I'd never let anyone make me feel disposable again. The building is calmer now. The new tenants are respectful, and for the first time, my home feels like my home. As for Clara, I heard she's renting a tiny place across town. Word is, she's working double shifts to keep up with bills. I don't know if she's learned her lesson. And maybe that's not my concern anymore. Revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, like the moment you take back your seat at the table, the one someone thought they could pull out from under you. I sip my coffee, close the curtains, and smile to myself. The queen is back on her throne.